Well, thanks, Patrick, for being here tonight. Thanks, everybody, for being here as well. And I've been lucky enough to be. We ended up talking a bit too long earlier on.
Way too long.
Yeah, exactly. I had a windshield break, and I had to quickly catch up with you before the talk, so I knew a little bit about some of the talking points, because you can only learn so much about somebody through their LinkedIn. That's why these things are so great. But the problem is, me and Patrick got on too well and started talking, and I heard the whole story. But I wanted to save some of it for tonight. I think Patrick saved some of it for us. Where I normally start these things is at the beginning, like where he grew up and things like that, because I think that gives him great context to who someone is and how they came to this journey. And there's lots of commonalities I find with entrepreneurs when we do these interviews, and one of those is ignorance, the ignorance we go into with things. And sometimes it's also like how we started, and these people seem to start really early with entrepreneurship. And so I want to start there. He was a kind of a military brat, kind of like
Foreign service,
and traveled around. So tell us a little bit about that, and a bit about some of the early starts into entrepreneurship. I think that started in college, but go ahead.
So I was born in Karachi, Pakistan. I no longer get weird looks from the customs people. What's that about? Because they know everything about me anyway. And that was my dad's first post. We came back. I don't remember anything of Pakistan. We left when I was 2. Came back, wandered the country while my dad somehow managed to get his PhD remotely at Columbia. We did spend a year in New York. How he did the rest of it, I'm not sure. And we ended up in Washington, D.C., where he worked for, the government, let's just say. He started in the Foreign Service, then he worked for the government, then he went back to the Foreign Service. And so I grew up in Washington, D.C. from age 6 through age 16. I went to one grade school and one high school. My youngest brother, who's 10 years younger, went to 12 schools before college, 3 in 1 year. And he was tossed out of 2 of them. So that's why it was 3. I lived in Turkey for a while. That was my dad's first post outside of D.C. afterwards. And then I started college at the University of Chicago. And while I was in D.C., I was, so a little bit of further family background. Everybody in my family is a civil servant. This goes back generations. Civil servant, preacher, doctor, or an academic. I am the first business person in 1,000 generations to steal Biden's phrase, who stole Neil Kinnock's phrase, who stole it from a Presbyterian minister. So I just always liked running lemonade stands. I ran a paper route. We delivered the paper for free, but then we came by afterwards and tried to convince them that if they thought it was worthwhile, they should pay a small subscription fee, the largest part of which I got to keep. So I was very motivated to make sure that they wanted to pay for the Uptown Citizen, it was called. And then ended up going off to the University of Chicago, not then known for its entrepreneurs. If you went to the business school, you were mostly buried in numbers and doing quantitative analysis of stocks and that sort of thing. But met a guy there named Gary Hoover, who moved here to Austin, started a bookstore chain called Bookstop here. And he started it here because he calculated how much money he would need to run ads, and it had the highest college-educated population of any city of its size in the U.S. So that's what brought him here. He then, a number of years later, ended up bringing me here when he sold Bookstop. It became Barnes & Noble, so he literally is the founder of Barnes & Noble. There were no superstores except for the one in Lower Fifth Avenue for Barnes & Noble when he sold his 40-odd stores to the Rigios. So I ended up here because Gary said, I want to publish a book about business. And I said, that's nice, but why don't we do it online? And Gary said, what's online? This is in 1990, and there was CompuServe. I will say I did run with Gary a couple of businesses in college. One was a bus company where we took students from their campuses in Chicago, mostly to their homes on the East Coast. We originally called it TW Bus because TWA was taken. And we did some other things. We used to go to the post office and buy books. We didn't know what was in the boxes. We just bid on them. And if we got lucky, we made some money. If we didn't get lucky, we got 26 physics textbooks. So we started here, and this was really my first introduction to entrepreneurship. I'll step back a little bit. I had a degree in ancient Roman history and law. And when I got out of law school, I decided I didn't want to work with any of the people I had spent the last 3 years with. And no offense to any of you who are lawyers, but it didn't seem that much fun to me. So I then got a job, the only job I could find, which was back in Chicago, which I didn't particularly want to go back to because it was too cold. And for a high-tech company in telecommunications, because they promised I could dabble on the business side. 2 years later, I was completely over on the business side, gave up law, and have been on the business side. There weren't any incubators this was in the 1980s. There were no incubators. There's nowhere where you could learn and get advice. You went to work for a big company, and you learned how to do budgets, and you learned accounting and all that sort of thing. And so that's how. Cost me 10 years of my life, but it was well worth it. Have a lot of friends from there still. But that's kind of how how I kind of got to be an entrepreneur. And maybe we'll take a breath here.
No, you've done great. Did you really consider yourself as an entrepreneur when you were peddling books and setting up bus routes? Or you not really see yourself as an entrepreneur? You just saw yourself as I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Well, it wasn't really an honorable profession back then as it is now. I mean, but I did. I really enjoyed having control over whether I was successful or not successful. And when you got the physics books, that was not a success. Yeah. And so, no, and ultimately, I ended up being a fairly senior executive at this telecoms company and at its parent company, which we were sold many times, Dow Jones, to Rolls-Royce, to a company called JWP in New York, which primarily owned HVAC and plumbing companies, and they bought tech companies for the loss carry-forwards. That was their strategic thing. So when they put me in charge of M&A, I went out and I said, well, what do you want me to buy? Anything with a big loss carry-forward. I said, really? Okay. So I got tired of that and quit. And Gary and I got together and started Hoover's, which was my first company. We took it public 9 years later, and then we sold it to Dun & Bradstreet a couple of years after that. Mm-hmm. And that gave me a taste for it. It was fun. Going public during the dot-com boom and bust, not so much fun. Mm-hmm. So we had 5 million.
Did you go public?
Sorry?
What year?
99.
99.
Yeah, really good. Well, it was 6 months, but if you're the CEO, your lockup is kind of permanent. And so I had to stay in. Some of my smarter family members got out, but I stayed in. And so we went public at the end of the first day of trading. Our $5 million in revenue company was worth $350 million. A year later, it was worth $35 million, and that wasn't the low point. And so everybody hated me. My family hated me, the ones that didn't sell. The board hated me. The institutional shareholders hated me. The employees hated me. They all thought they had millions of dollars, and they didn't. And I was always aware that they didn't have millions of dollars. Forget about the lockup. But no, it was a real experience, and you have no control. And once you become CEO of a public company, that's your job. That's your only job. You don't get to do anything fun anymore, unless you think that's fun. So, anyway, my wife, who was from Chicago, kind of said at the end of that, she said, "Okay, I've done 10 years in Texas. I'm going home. You can come with me if you want." So I did, and I started another company, which was basically, I'd become a big fan of Dow Jones News Retrieval, now called Factiva. Millions, hundreds of millions actually, of documents that you could go in and find using technology. And so I wasn't a natural technology person, but I found technology was great for doing research, which is what I love doing. And so basically, I started a company that was Factiva for small businesses. It didn't have the New York Times in it necessarily, didn't have some of those things, but, and I, unlike the Hoovers, which we started from scratch, I found a busted.com and I bought their customer base, which was in rapid decline. It was called Infonautics. They served students, they thought. I said, students don't pay for anything. I don't know who you're serving, but it's not students, we'll find out. And so we found out it was small business people. And so we created, we licensed more information, more applicable to that market. And that was actually the best company I ever did. It only took me 6 years, and we had the best exit. I had, way better exit for the employees and initial investors than Hoover's. And not quite as good as my last exit, but it was a really good exit, so I was excited.
Mm. So you saw quite a lot of change over that time, I presume. Like, I feel like we've all seen change now. Like, in the UK, it was the same, where being an entrepreneur wasn't sexy and wasn't sort of like sought after. From the UK, there's a sitcom called Only Fools and Horses, which my European friends would kind of relate to, where you're a bit of a Del boy, you're a bit of a trier, you're a bit of a, trying things out. And so you saw that change happening, because you saw also the negative connotations of the dot-com boom as well. And so how did you see this sort of market change and the perception change of entrepreneurs and technology at the time?
Well, we went from top of the hill to the valley. And it came back more quickly than most people remember. When I moved to Chicago, when I bought this company, I had some investors from Hoover's who'd made money. If you invested initially in Hoover's, you made good money. It's just all the people who invested along the way and in the IPO who didn't make money. Because we did come back. I think we sold for $120 million, and it was a good deal if you'd been in there, other than while we were public. But I think the change in view of entrepreneurs has occurred more recently. I mean, the last 10 to 15 years, you have incubators everywhere. You have a support system of money, expertise, and what. I mean, this room is like a perfect example. There are people with money, expertise, and what have you, helping entrepreneurs do this thing. And I will tell you, quite frankly, I quit my job at the big company because I didn't have enough control. And so when I didn't initially become CEO of Hoover's, but I had a lot of control, and so I wanted to be able to make it what I wanted to make it, and that was true of every company I started. Is you have control, you have to be careful about that because you don't know everything, and you make a lot of mistakes, just like you did in the big company, and so it's just a lot more fun and satisfying to be in control of my life and to not be fired at a moment's notice, which I almost was at the big company, for nothing. So,
yeah, having the control of your destiny. Yeah. And so you you made that other company, and so you had a few. Did you have a few other companies in between before you started the bigger one?
Well, a friend of mine who is now infamous, his name is Michael Wolff, not the musician, but the author. I said, we should go into news, Patrick. Let's go into news. I said, well, Michael, there's too much news out there now.
What year was this?
This was 2000, oh boy, it's been a long time, around 2009. Mm-hmm. And I kept saying, no, there's too much news. We can't do that. And then he said, well, what if we create less news? And so his idea was to create compartmentalized information a la USA Today, except on the internet. So you make it even smaller than it would normally be on the internet. And I said, that could work. So we tried that, and to be honest, when you enter an industry that is in steep decline, as it has been, the news industry, for 15 years, and I don't keep track of it anymore, but at one point, all of the revenue from news, this was a few years back, was only 30% of what it had been 12 years prior. And so Newser is still there, still makes a little money, And one of the things we're doing with it is we have writers. They're trained in our style to write, 100 to 150 words that tells you everything you need to know. We're not political. We don't have a point of view. We just try and summarize. So we might summarize different political points of view, but we're trying to give you the stories you need to read to be aware, and the stories that are fun. And it's worked reasonably well. We have 3 million people who come, but it's an economic failure. I cannot return the $4 million invested in it today. So we are going to use AI to start writing stories. Well, we already have done it. And it's not very good yet, but it's not terrible. And so it'll take us 6 to 9 months to get the voice of our writers. And so that will allow us to go from publishing 40 stories a day to, when I really hallucinate, 400 stories a day. And we already have the technology. It just wasn't very useful when you add 40 stories to know what people liked. So we know what people like. We just don't have another story for them that day that relates to what they like. And even we might not have another story for weeks that relates to that thing they like. So I don't think of it as a failure, but it's one that didn't work. It was a pretty good idea. And we're going to give it one last go with AI and see if we can get the volume we need, because all advertising for sites like ours is programmatic. You're just having one of the ad networks throw stuff on your pages. And the programmatic advertising, the value of it is, just continues to go down literally every day, except in December. Then it goes up. Not much. And that goes way down to January. So that's the one that kind of didn't work, but I learned as much from it as from all the things that did work.
Still fun. What role did you take at that business?
I was the CEO.
You were the CEO.
I'm always the CEO.
Yeah, I like that. I like that
I like
too.
that control.
I'm the same. And that was 2009, but that's right? 2009. So then when did the latest business that you exited a year ago, when did that start?
2011. So this was an instance where I had run, this is the only company I've started that was truly driven by a mission. I mean, the other things, I was interested in them, they were fun, I was passionate about them, but a member of my family had gotten ill, we ran into the healthcare system, seriously ill, into the healthcare system, and found it wanting. And so I decided that healthcare needed fixing. I think I'm the first person to come up with that. No,
Never heard it.
And so again, I went back to somebody from the University of Chicago who'd become a doctor and also an entrepreneur, and we looked at a whole bunch of things, and we ended up in telemedicine. And nobody had heard of telemedicine then. We thought it was a great idea. Essentially, some big companies, some of which are still around, most of which have gone away in one form or another, were selling the ability to talk to a doctor more or less instantly as an employee benefit. And we just didn't understand why no one was using it. The employees weren't using it. The company didn't seem to care. And so it wasn't having anything other than it was now benefit number 26 for IBM.
So who was your customer? Was it an IBM? Was that the customer?
Well, a lot of our competitors sold through the payors, the insurance companies to most of us. And so that was their customer. They would also sell directly to companies. But we saw a market in the mid-market, less than 5,000 employees and more than 100. And so we went after that, and that's dominated and controlled by brokers.
What did you see that they maybe didn't? If everyone else was in the other side?
Well, healthcare is, everybody was making money by doing nothing. I mean, it's a wasteful thing. The payors were, administering all of this and getting more money from the self-insured companies. The HR department would say, oh, we have this great new benefit. They didn't know whether it was a good benefit or not. And we took a different approach. All those companies are self-insured. And so to the extent that you can reduce their healthcare costs, which when you even talk about that, they say, well, it's not possible. So to the extent that you can reduce healthcare costs, you can get their attention. So our first year, we couldn't get any brokers to talk to us or present us to their clients. So I went out along with, I had two other partners, and we sold 12 companies. And we had 6,000 employees covered in those 12 companies. And I had to pull favors, like several of my investors' companies became clients because I
Do what you got to do.
become a client or lose your money.
Good incentive, I think.
And so utilization, which is how many calls there are to a doctor per employee in the company, was running about 3% back then. And the reason is nobody really cared, nobody focused on it. And so we went to these companies and we said, well, you're self-insured. What if we guaranteed you that you would save money and that you would actually make money on your investment as well? And they said, yeah, right. So we had to make it a guarantee. And that number was around 25%, which was 5, 6, 7 times more than anybody in the industry was doing at that time. But we felt if we did a few things right, we could do it. And those few things were, we need to be able to talk to your employees directly, and you can't charge your employees for the consult because they don't know who they're talking to. It could be a doctor in far office stand. Until they actually talk to the doctor, they're not going to believe anything about the doctor. So first of all, you take that away. You take away that kind of, I don't know if this guy's any good, and I'll lose my $40 copay, and so forth and so on. So those are the two things that made it possible, and we got 34% utilization in the first year. And after that, it was pretty easy to convince brokers and others to sign up. We gave them a guarantee that we give them 25% utilization, which is above the break even. And we extended the business over the years from urgent care to mental health care to primary care a couple of years ago. And it was very satisfying because we didn't have to work with the payors, who are the main problem with American healthcare right now. And we got to work directly with companies, and the companies got direct feedback, which we received as well from their employees, saying, like, this is the greatest thing I've ever had. This is like real healthcare. I don't know what our numbers are right now, but we were at 3 minutes average. So if you called from Montana at midnight during hunting season, it was probably longer. But if you called from any major city or any big state during the business day, it was like 30 seconds to instantly that you would talk to a doctor. So, I got a great deal of satisfaction out of giving patients a better life. And someone earlier today asked me, don't you have to follow the dollars and figure out, how to get that money? And the answer is the dollars flow if you take care of whoever it is you are trying to help. And that's patients, and that's employees. And so literally we had no loss of clients out of that first 12. And I think it was maybe 3 years before we lost a client. So, 100%. And then we went down. That first year we lost one client. So we're 98% retention of clients. So we just, and then COVID came along, and nobody knew what telemedicine was, and nobody knew that it wasn't a doctor from far off a stand, but nobody had any choice. They had to call us because they couldn't go anywhere. So that was both a blessing and a curse. The blessing was we didn't have to explain telemedicine. We never had to explain it to the brokers or to the employers, but getting patients, employees to do it was hard. But after that, you didn't have to do it anymore. The downside of that was we were running about 45% utilization on March 7th, 2020. By March 17th, 2020, we were running 98% utilization, and we charged a flat rate. So we were going to be in big trouble. The nice thing, if there could be said to be a nice thing about COVID, was it turns out that if you stay home, you wash your hands 10 times a day, you stay 6 feet away from human beings, you wear a mask, not only do you not get COVID, you don't get colds or flu, and I'm sure you all remember this. I mean, I didn't have a cold for like 2.5 years. It was wonderful.
Or any friends.
Yeah. Well, we had Zoom.
Yeah, we had Zoom. That was comparable, I think.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about this when we had our kind of pre-interview, but how did you seed the doctor side so that you had enough supply?
That was our biggest concern because doctors worked for big institutions and what have you. Turns out that was the easiest thing to do. Really? Doctors were in 2011, deeply disillusioned with the institutions that they worked for. They hated it. Many of them practices, almost all the practices in the United States are now owned institutionally. And there are only two choices for when you sell your company. One is your local hospital system, and maybe there are two, so there's some competition. And the other is United Healthcare. United Healthcare employs more doctors than I suspect any company in the world, but I know any company in North America. And so they're both on the doctor side, the provider side, and on the payor side. So they're double dipping. That's kind of how we ended up where we were.
Yeah. And we're seeing now in the market, like people like Wheel, who are kind of that what do you call it? Telemedicine as a service? You probably
Virtual healthcare is what they like to call it now, because that covers a wide variety of areas and sins.
Because we're seeing with that, like, more people who need a doctor to be in the mix. So these kind of like plug in, don't they? Things like Wheel, where you're a standalone product.
Well, there were, that existed before, it just wasn't on a platform. So Wheel did a great job of pulling together the platform for that, as have other companies. There are several second opinion companies, most of which kind of failed because they didn't have a platform. It was very bespoke. Telemedicine has become sort of not its own thing anymore. I mean, Teladoc, when I first came across them, after they first went public, was trading at 20 times revenues. You can probably look on your phones. I believe it's trading at almost 1 times revenue right now. And they just didn't think about it in a bigger way. They didn't think about making the patient happy, the brokers happy, all of these things. And so we were small. We have great loyalty from both our clients, the companies, the brokers that help us reach the companies, and the patients. And if you create a better mousetrap and you sell it, and you just continually work on it, you have a successful company.
And that was 11 years for you.
It was.
And so how did it come to the conclusion where you stepped away a year ago now?
I got bored.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't like doing things for a long period of time. 10 years is like my max target. High beam was 6 years. I was like ecstatic about that. So I just like doing different things. And I have no background in medicine. That's why I had to bring a doctor in.
Yeah.
And I had no background in company information or any of that. I was just a kind of utility infielder in terms of thinking about problems and loving research. And there's less research when you're doing a service like First Stop Health is, but still, it's.
That's interesting. I want to hear your opinion a bit more, if you can unpack that you don't have a background in medicine. You have it in Roman history and whatnot. And I've heard, through these talks, I've met a few investors actually who will only invest in people who had some background in medical. So what's your opinion on that, like founders going into this industry without that type of background?
Well, medicine is different from almost any other industry I've been in. You do have to have expertise, which is why my co-founder was a physician. And he was also a physician entrepreneur, but I was really the entrepreneur side. And so I don't know, I went to college at the University of Chicago. I read Thucydides 3 times, only once for not even Roman history, but ancient history. And so if you know how to think and you find something you're passionate about, and it can be something you find your lifelong passion, something you find just by happenstance, you can make anything happen. And it's all about being thoughtful in the way you manage risk, thoughtful in the way you set up your vision, and thoughtful in the way you pivot and manage. The vision can't change. If it does, you need to stop that company. But you can change. I mean, we tried going, at First Stop Health, we tried going to consumers. So this consumer-driven healthcare. What we got? A bunch of drug addicts. And,
like students that don't have any money.
Yeah. Well, they would pay for it, but like one woman made 10 or 12 versions of herself because in the meth belt in the South, it takes a prescription to get epinephrine. And so she just created all these entities and became a subscriber and paid our fees and got all this stuff. And I said, like, I don't want to deal with that. So companies took us a year. You asked me, how did we finance it for a year? I raised money. I went out, told people I need money to make this work. And fortunately, I'd made the money before, so they were open to the proposition.
So when a year's going by, are they getting itchy feet?
No.
They knew that it was going to take long.
If we hadn't done what we did, they would have gotten nervous.
Yeah.
But I'd done well at High Beam, so again, I always put a lot of money into my companies. And I know that's not typical of a lot of entrepreneurs, sometimes because they don't have money, but I rolled at least half of what I made forward in every company I went in. Newser's a little bit of an exception because it was a smaller company. But and I owned 3% of Hoover's when it was sold. So it sold for a nice price, but I didn't make a lot of money. So I just put a lot of money at risk so that I would own somewhere between 20 and 40% of the company after that. And that's what I did, and it worked out. And now that I don't have to put half of what I just made into a company because I'm having fun, I'm putting into other people's companies in the form of angel investing and also in the form of eleemosynary, charitable kinds of endeavors. Both, I like to be local and I like to be international. And so that's where my money goes now. And then I just travel for fun the rest of the time. Yeah. And try and leave Austin during the summer and be here during the winter.
You migrate. So we're going to ask about that, like what you're working on now. So it's angel investments and this sort of philanthropy within, sort of geographically within Austin. Is there anything else you'd like to say about those kind of angel investments, like the thesis of that? That's one question I have.
Well, I mean, the thesis is I've invested with people who I've known and trusted for a period of time. So the one I'm currently invested in, which is AI healthcare company, I've known the fellow for 15 years, and we've talked, and he's here in Austin, and I know he's an honest, hardworking, and trustworthy person, and that's what I want. And you need to be smart too. So he's smart. And so that's my thesis. I mean, so that is, we take HR documents, we run them through our AI tool, and we allow, so a Fortune 500 company might have as many as 50 people who answer questions about leave policy, you name it. So we can do all that right now for any company for however many policies they have, however many HR benefits they have, and do it in plain English using one of the tools we all use. But we've customized it. We use, I forget what they're called. I call them small large language models. But I think they're called SAMs now, and I can't remember what SAM stands for. But it's small something something. And so if you contain the documents that you put in there, you get good answers. So I mean, you want to know how if you're thinking of retiring, how Medicare works. You want to know. So when I first left the company, I went down the street to the CVS, which is closest to me, and they said, "Oh, it'll be $280 for your shingle shot." I said, "Well, how's that? I've been in CVS, for years, and you just covered all that." And they wouldn't tell me. They said, "Just pay the $280 and you can get reimbursed." So I went back to our brokers at the company that I used to work at, and I said, "What's up with this?" "Oh, you can only go to Walgreens now." I said, "Well, when was that email sent to me?" Never. So that would have been easily findable by me just by interrogating the AI agent. And so I'm excited about the opportunities to give people better answers, maybe save some companies money, which a lot of AI, it's not clear how they'll save money, but this does it. So that's an example of a local thing I'm doing.
That's wicked. And in a second, I'm going to open us up to Q&A. I've got one last question. It's a bit of a broad one, so answer it however you want. Which is, you've had this like massive career, and you're now seeing these new companies come about. But what's generally, what's the changes you've really seen generationally and over the last 30 years or so? Like how business is shifting, how the economy is shifting.
So I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to start by looking like I'm in a vice presidential debate or a presidential.
By avoiding the question.
By answering the question I want to answer.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I want that.
But I'll get to that. So when I was growing up, my father was a kid from the south side of Chicago, immigrant parents, and he got drafted into the Army when he was 18 at the end of World War II, and ended up in occupied Japan as General MacArthur's photographer. And he fell in love with foreign lands, even though the first place he'd been outside of Chicago was Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training, and that was more exotic in his telling than Japan. And when he came out of that in the early 1950s, there's a book by Dean Acheson called Present at the Creation. He was present at the creation of the modern world. I mean, Cold War, all of that, nuclear weapons and that sort of thing. And I'm saying, like, I'm never going to have an opportunity like that. And I said, then television came along, and he didn't care about television, but I miss television too. Like, what's going to happen, if anything, that's going to be interesting? And then the internet came along and changed everything. And so even though you can't predict any of these events, they happen. And I believe that the next thing after the internet is going to be AI that is going to change everything. I mean, internet companies quickly became, oh, you're just an electricity company. That's right, you're just using a bunch of tools to do something else in some other industry better. And so AI is going to help us do that. And so you have to be mindful of that. And I was always mindful of this, but could I have predicted the internet? No. I actually thought there were going to be like 100 online services. Maybe they talk a little bit to each other. And so I went out at Hoover's and I tried to sell CompuServe, and they said, go away. You're too small. You're from Texas. But I said, okay, who's next? They have 1 million customers. Well, next was 125,000 customers, 150,000 customers. And it was a little company called America Online. And they had 60 employees. And I went out to their office in Vienna, Virginia, and I walked in there. They'd given me an appointment. They said, well, just want to let you know in advance, we don't think that our consumers are interested in business. They like sports and music and things like that. And I said, well, do any of your consumers go to school? Oh, yeah, a lot of them. Do any of them have jobs where they might need some information? Oh, yeah. And do you think they invest? Oh, definitely. I said, well, then you have to have Hoovers. And Steve Case is circling. He never said anything, but he's circling and circling. And I got in there at noon, and I left at 9 in the evening, and I had a deal with him to put us on. And that was the thing that made us, because AOL then grew to, 30 million people in the next few years. And so I couldn't have predicted that, but you just need to be open to these opportunities as they come along. If you think online is important, if you think AI is important, if you think the internet is important, and I actually think healthcare is important. And that's so much harder to kind of, there aren't going to be any radical changes in the United States in healthcare anytime soon. So you have to gnaw at the edges. But the edges are so big, it's like a $2 trillion business. It's the biggest industry in the country. So I think it's just kind of being open to that. And then I think people who are interested in change, and to quote my partner Michael Wolff I think at South by Southwest when he spoke there, people all say they like change, everybody hates change. But I think entrepreneurs don't. I think entrepreneurs, I get bored. I like to learn new things. I probably would have been better if I'd stayed in one industry and knew everything about it, but that's boring. So, and I think that's increasingly the case. I was talking with somebody here, and he told me that he had been in healthcare. I said, yeah, and then done these things. Was that in healthcare? Oh, no. Just, so you can jump from one thing to another. You can say, maybe I'm a specialist in sales or engineering or business development. But it's about not getting bored, about making sure that you're giving back to somebody important. I love giving back to patients because being sick sucks. So that's how I've lived my life and tried to. I think I could have become an investment banker, made a lot more money, but that wasn't interesting to me. It was interesting to have some effect, some influence. You can only have so much on the way business is done and people's lives.
Amen. So I want to open it up to the questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand my microphone around. And this doesn't amplify anything. It just allows our camera to be able to pick up some audio. So I'm going to pass mine around. All my colleagues are going to help me with that. So anyone got any questions for Patrick? Thank you.
What are your top 3 best lessons learned in all these businesses? Or you can just give us one that is
I'll
so
give you the first
impactful.
one that I frequently answer, and it's a little, depressing. But I don't fire people fast enough, and you as an entrepreneur can't fire people who aren't working out fast enough. You want to give people every chance. You want to give them a second chance and a third chance, but you can tell when they're not going to work out, and you shouldn't do that. And I will tell you, I've had several people come back to me after they were fired and became tremendously successful at something else. Said, God, the best thing that ever happened to me was when I fired you, or when you fired me, sorry.
That's good.
So I don't know that there are a lot of other rules in learning. Just one thing, you can bet like you're playing blackjack, or you can bet like you're playing roulette. You're more likely to win really big at roulette, but you're less likely to ever win. And if you take a series of risks over a longer period of time, that's how you build a company.
That was great. Thank you. Any top books or podcasts that have kind of changed or created an inflection point for you as you think about what you've been building or how you've, managed your team, or just, share some knowledge?
So I'm sorry, I missed a little bit of what you first said. You're asking me, have I written books about?
If there's any books or podcasts that really helped you. Is that right?
Okay. Well, some of them won't be that interesting to you because they're ancient texts. But I have to say that even though all of his conclusions were wrong, mostly, so let's not say all, most of Jim Collins's conclusions were wrong about what made companies stay, because shortly after they didn't. The notion of having a flywheel effect at a company, getting everything running right, that is the big learning from a business book, because it can take years, it can take months. But the more you do business, the more likely it's going to be to take months. And so you learn, I need to hire a marketing person at this stage, not first and not last, and what have you. So I would say that was one. This will be weird too. The Right Stuff is the best book I've ever read.
Got a nods on that one for the camera. A lot of people nodding in agreement.
Well, it's first of all, the author, I mean, just literally the way he writes was so original. But this is a massive challenge that they did with I don't even know how to describe. I don't know if there is anything that has less memory and processing in it today than they used to go to the moon. And to do the early projects that are the focus of that book. Yeah.
Quick question. You mentioned you like control. Do you have any particular opinions or advice on working with a partner versus not working with a partner? Now I know you always have a team around you, but
With one exception, I always worked with a partner because they would have an expertise that I didn't have. And also they're your peer, and so you can talk to them about things that worry you. You can't talk to your employees about what worries you. And so and you can't even talk to the vice president or senior vice president or executive senior vice president right underneath you. So founders can talk to founders, peers can talk to peers about the fears and concerns they have. And so I've found partners to be the best. Even Michael Wolff, everyone told me he'd sue me because he had sued other people constantly. But he and I got along fabulously. He knew news, and I knew how to run a company, and we're still best of friends.
Very specifically on healthcare platforms, I know you mentioned second opinion platforms, and they're not being kind of the any that really have taken off. Are there other reasons why you think that second opinion platforms haven't really taken off, or is it just buy-in? What's your perspective on that?
Well,
just given your
typically you need it if it's a hard case. I mean, so there's that issue. So you have to find the physician or researcher who really knows that topic, and remarkably, that doesn't exist in a list. You can find it, but you have to kind of know how to do medical research and that sort of thing. But now I'm going to get really cynical and tell you why their second opinions are hard. Hospital systems want to keep all the money in their own system. They don't want you going anywhere else. They won't say, well, I won't treat you again if you go somewhere else, but they think they know everything and they don't want to lose that money. And all the people you're working with are employees of the hospital system. They're not partners in it. And so they're told, this is the way you do it, and they do it. And so that's, I think, one.
I'd be curious. It's not a technical question, but more of like the standpoint of your career. I know you said you would get bored and try different industries, but I'm sure there's many people out there that after their first or second successful exit, they would say, okay, well, I'll just travel the world, or I'll put it in a trust and do my own thing and just enjoy. What's your driver? What keeps you going and, just starting that new company? And like, it needs some sort of motivation and determination, because some people would just go and enjoy.
Well, a very close friend of mine did exactly that. He's currently somewhere in Peru or Ecuador on a bicycle riding to Tierra del Fuego from Cartagena. And he's having a blast. It's really fulfilling for him. I'm too driven to do that, to take it easy like that. I mean, I'm taking it easy now. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to be relaxed. So far, I'm a little over a year in. It's great, but I'm keeping my fingers in a lot of different things, so I get a lot of stimulation and I don't get bored.
Yeah. So you mentioned or closed by saying nothing in healthcare is changing anytime soon. So I'm going to start my question by fervently disagreeing, hopefully.
I'm talking about the business of healthcare.
Yeah, I know. And I say that because, COVID changed a lot, right? A lot of things that were sort of rickety broke. Right now, 25% of all healthcare dollars are spent at the end of life, and another, 1% of all American dollars are spent on kidney care alone. There's lots that is just on the verge of collapse, and one of the fastest ways to incite change in healthcare is when our financial structures collapse and they can no longer handle the strain of whatever's coming in. So as a harbinger in some way, shape, or form, knowing the healthcare systems so well, what do you think is on the verge of collapse? What is at its highest point of stress across the healthcare industry?
None of it's going to collapse. I mean, it's so ingrained. Payors decide who gets paid, how much. They get paid a crazy amount of money. The statistic I like in healthcare is the United States spends 18% of GDP on healthcare, highest thing we spend money on. We rank 39th out of 45 developed countries in outcomes, mortality, infant, everything. France not known for its efficiency as a country.
Strike a bit.
Yeah. Spends 11% of GDP and is ranked number 1. And there's very little difference between the provider world in France and here. Now, the doctors were trained at no cost there, so they don't have debt. They don't feel forced to become brain surgeons or what have you. And there are some government hospitals, but it's largely a private industry. And there's one difference, single payer. And single payer doesn't need United Healthcare with its hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue and tens of billions of dollars of profit, or Aetna, or the Blues, to push paperwork around. And they also have the advantage of being able to tell the drug companies, if you want to sell your drug in France, this is how much it'll cost. So, that's the biggest problem we have in this country is drug costs. We are subsidizing the third world, which I think is appropriate and good. We are subsidizing all of Europe and all of developed Asia as well. We pay 10, 20 times more for a drug than they do there. Mm-hmm. So, and there are too many people with too strong an interest. Obama almost got it changed to at least an option to take the federal Medicare plan. But in the end, those companies give to every member of Congress, and every member of Congress takes the money, regardless of their persuasion and politics, what have you, except for Bernie Sanders. He wouldn't take the money. So I don't think it will collapse. I think we'll just keep spending more money on it, and we think, oh, it can't sustain higher than 18. Well, it just keeps moving up a half a point every couple of years, and so it'll go forever.
Let's do one more question from Mark, and then have dinner.
Yeah. I'll try and end on a cynical question for you. So as a fellow medical founder without a medical background, one of the things I find particularly frustrating is the lack of, like, how difficult it is to build culture among healthcare professionals, to get them to buy into purpose-driven, to get them to do anything outside of like something that's very transactional. And it's probably more prevalent in telehealth than traditional healthcare, but I'd be interested in your experience with building culture as the kind of group grew. Obviously, you had a co-founder that was in the medical space, so that might have helped, but just any general...
No, it hurt. On culture. Command and control. Traditional doctor, he's my age. I don't know how to build culture either. So I find somebody in the company who's really good at that. And so someone who started with the company about 8 years ago had lots of great ideas around, and I said, well, why don't you start working on these things? And, we've had, I don't know, half a dozen mission statements. They don't mean anything, but we were able to kind of get 4 things that we wanted people to keep in mind when they made a decision. Make sure one of these things is, in the front of your mind. And it was this young woman who came at a middle level to do this, who kind of drove this forward. And so the only way I can remember it is it's like just practice the cut. So it's C-U-T-T. It's caring, unrelenting, transparent, and trusting. And so if you hit all 4 of those, you have a home run. And if you're just saying, like, I think this will help with transparency, or help with patient trust, or help with employee trust, and to make sure that I'm not being too cynical about that, the woman who did that is now the CEO.
That's brilliant. There you go, Mark. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your time. Thanks so much.
You bet. Thank you.